Hey everyone, Luke Nukem is back here once again. Last time I reviewed the 2006 masterpiece by the name of Children of Men, which was undoubtedly one of my favorite movies of all time. This time, seeing how I've been mostly reviewing animated films as of late, that being Trolls World Tour and Scoob, but instead of progressing back in time, we are progressing forward in time, to the year of 2009. The year where one of the most overrated ripoffs became the highest grossing film of all time, Neil Blomkamp made one of the finest directorial debuts ever made, and Zack Snyder can actually, for once in his life, can make a profoundly awesome comic book adaptation. Oh, how the mighty competent have fallen. But it was also a year where animated films brought their end game. We had Coraline, we had Fantastic Mr. Fox, we had Up. The list goes on and on and on. But out of the entire year for me, there was one animated film alone that stood head and neck above the competition. A PG-13 animated film released on the 9th day of the 9th month in 2009 that features a bleak post-apocalyptic world where humanity is lost and all but 9 Stitch Punks remain against a mechanical force of destruction. Folks, this movie right here is not your average animated kids film. This is the underrated brilliance of 9. The first time I knew about this movie was the incredibly badass trailer that I saw back in 2009 when I saw Coraline on DVD, which stands today as testament as one of the best trailers for a movie I have ever seen in my life. The minute I heard Coed and Cambria's welcome home and gazed at the action set pieces in the atmospheric setting, I couldn't brace myself for any more awesomeness any further than how I was originally. I was beyond hyped for this movie that I saw every trailer, every TV spot, every promotional clip online, and I was constantly asking every single person who saw the movie what their perspectives were and how they thought of the film. Despite me at the time being 11 and this movie being PG-13, I pleaded my family for me to go see this movie. But despite the little old me in 2009 with my anticipation at an all-time high, I wasn't able to see the movie because of parental restrictions. That was until years later, where the film finally arrived on DVD and Blu-ray, and I witnessed something that delivered everything I ever asked for and still holds up years later. 9 is not only my favorite animated movie of all time, but it's one of the most underrated movies I have ever seen. Because to this day, I have no earthly clue why this movie still has above average review scores, and mediocrity in Pixar's future still gets more undeserved 10s than Ty Dillinger. But of course, there are other animated films that I love that I watched back when I was a kid, discovered upon curiosity and ended up loving to death, or took as an emotional experience that impacted me on a personal and relatable level, while still loving the film based on its own objective merits. But 9 wasn't just a movie that took every single ounce of anticipation I had back then, and even appealing to my liking of the sci-fi dystopian genre, and cranks that fiery elation up all the way to the size of the Burj Khalifa. But it was also a movie that opened the doors for me, trying to find underrated and overlooked gems throughout the decade that deserve more love, attention, and even second chances. But what makes this movie hold a place for your pyromanciness, if that's even a term, is that it's also the directorial debut of Shane Acker, who directed in 2005 an animated short film that the film was based on for a student project at the UCLA Animation Workshop, which then became of all things an Academy Awards contender for Best Animated Short. And with its visually impressive animation and its bleak, action-driven storytelling, that short absolutely deserves its recognition. Eventually, producer Tim Burton came across Shane Acker's work and was so impressed by his animation and his storytelling that he decided, along with executive producer Timur Bekmambetov, to bring the animated short all the way to the big screen in a feature-length animated film, with Shane Acker himself in the director's chair. Now I know what you're thinking. What is the film like, you ask? Well, let's get this underway, shall we? 9 sets us in a 1930s alternative world, where mankind's pursuit of technology in the name of progress has led the human race to extinction, in a war where the machines have turned against the humans. In an effort to keep life prosperous for all that is left, a scientist turns to alchemy and creates 9 Stitch Punks, or ragdolls, whichever you prefer, by giving them parts of his soul via a small talisman, which unfortunately kills him after he creates his final and youngest creation, 9. While 9 is wandering the ruins in the aftermath of war, he encounters his numbered predecessors and discovers the existence of horrifying threats out to hunt them. But when he accidentally awakens a mechanical behemoth known as Brain, a turn-evil model that was also created by the scientist, he risks his life to find answers and finish what he started before all that represents life is lost. Now, for starters, a problem I occasionally notice whenever I see film critics or movie reviewers talk about this film is that they say that on a writing standpoint, the plot is weak and it has to heavily rely on exposition in order to move its plot forward. This is something I highly disagree with. Firstly, the story ushers in an entirely new and interesting perspective in the post-apocalyptic genre. Yes, mankind suffered at the fate of the machines, causing a humanless apocalypse. But having the entire film revolve around characters and enemies that were all constructed by the intellect and the soul of one man, as they both fight for diabolical and righteous intents, is something that is totally unheard of. And in practice, it executes with aplomb. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, I can't spoil majorly specific plot elements for you all, but what I can say is that the movie does an incredible job putting you in the shoes of characters who are not only trying to survive, but trying to end the conflict of what started the chaos in the first place. In terms of explaining its world, however, it uses just enough information to let the viewer in on what is transpiring in the setting, but not to the extent where it has to constantly explain pieces of the lore, characters, their backstory, the background, the mythology, or the entirety of a plot, or explain so little that you don't even register on how everything goes or what came to be. In 9, the backstory is like one small story about the war while transitioning into the past, create the impression to us that what happened in the past, how devastating the war was, and how the Stitchpunks managed to thrive while hiding from a mechanized monster are ultimately fascinating. Visual aids from newspapers to real footage, propaganda, messages about the war and the Brain's captivating origin, to journals of dark science, congeal to answer questions, and provides valuable narrative information and understandable world building to the audience within just 79 minutes, which is its actual screen time, by the way. Another thing that I like that also gets criticisms are the characters. Even if the argument can be made that the characters are one-dimensional, it still cannot go without saying that, despite their presentation, the characters are distinguishable, interesting, likable, and definitely memorable. This assessment is showcased within the performances of the voice actors, the writing, and the character development. For starters, let's talk about the character of 5, who was voiced wonderfully by John C. Reilly. Yes, Wreck-It Ralph himself. 5 does appear as the typical tag-along friend that joins along with 9 on his journey, but there is more to this character than what is at face value. The first time we see him, he is more protected, timid, and is subjective into being loyal to a fearful leader. But as the film progresses, he becomes more courageous and determined to do what's right, thanks to development and friendship that he has with the main character, all the while John C. Reilly gives him dimensional personality and endearment to the character. A big highlight in the cast is Christopher Plummer as One, the very first creation of the Stitchpunks. Not only is Plummer's voice acting so sublime as his crotchety priest-like leader, but the character himself is truly complicated. Of course, his actions and leadership imply that he is very insensible and cowardice, thinking that he knows more than others. But at the same time, you get to know more about this character, as it is also revealed that he truly cares about what's left of his remaining congregation, resulting in him having a very impactful and heroic character arc that he has towards the end of the film. Martin Landau as 2, rest in peace, is a splendid delight as he voices the frail but heartfelt inventor. Crispin Glover hones in the very artistic and peculiar nature of the Oracle 6 very well, and Jennifer Connelly Seddon sells the role as being a fearless and rebellious warrior while also being the primary female of the group. However, unlike today's modern version of what a strong female character is supposed to look like, she has understandable motivations and character arcs, she doesn't do things to make herself look cool, she's desperate, she's flawed, she gets injured in the middle of a boss fight, and she gets captured while trying to save and protect others that she desperately cares about. And all of that while having a very genuine and likable personality. I guess Captain Marvel should probably look into that. Which brings us to the character of 9, the main protagonist, who is voiced by Frodo Baggins himself, Elijah Wood. Despite him being the youngest of the group, 9 is without question the most relatable character throughout the entire film because he behaves and interacts in ways that the audience would. From confronting and taking initiative into matters that need to be solved, to owning to mistakes and taking action when all hope seems to be lost, to wandering lost through the ruined streets of corpses and destroyed machinery to find out if he isn't alone. 9 may be the basic hero, but in the writing department and in Wood's performance, he is the soulful and hopeful character that the audience and the characters can attach themselves to. What's truly fascinating to me is that this movie's budget is $30 million. And it still looks state-of-the-art by today's standards. The copious level of persistence that went into the CG animation for this movie is all apparent from the movie's beginning all the way to its conclusion. The design and atmosphere of decrepit buildings, fields, and neighborhoods turned war zones are wonderfully rendered. The color palette is marvelous as it matches its dark aesthetic, not to mention its color usage with pretty skies of pink, and the grained luminous texture of the souls and the magic of the talisman. The character design of the ragdolls are unique, with each having a distinct style of apparel, talents, trinkets, and gadgets that give them defining attributes, and even the design of the robotic monsters, like the brain's spider-like design, the cat beast's animalistic menacing detail, the wing beast's sharp features, and even models like the seamstress that are not only excellently built, but are sure to bring some significant level of nightmare fuel to your little kids. There are indeed some nitpicky moments where the movie's animation does have tiny frame rate drops, minuscule inconsistencies, and even repeated movements of animation but shot in a different background. But it really isn't anything damaging that tarnishes the animation work as a whole, as they are generally on their own small little issues. The film, surprisingly, has a very great balance and tone, because for the most part, the film is very bleak. You occasionally do get sweet and genuine moments of levity and humor, so that way the film doesn't take itself too seriously. But when the film gets dark, it doesn't pull away its punches, as there is a substantial amount of death and disturbing imagery in the movie, which is shocking for an animated film. When you see something that scares you, or whenever someone dies, you feel it like a punch in the gut, especially when a human or ragdoll meets its fate with a Grim Reaper. And you know what? Here's something for you guys. You remember back in my Frozen 2 review how I rarely talk about animated flicks' scale and cinematography? Well, get ready for this, because this is also the first film that made me fully appreciate cinematography and shot composition in animated movies. Nine's cinematography is insanely breathtaking. Not a single shot feels like a waste, as they capture the creepy, gloomy aesthetic of the post-apocalyptic world to perfection into every camera angle or frame. From shots of the post-apocalyptic landscape and rubble, isolated buildings like the library in disarray, angles like the Stitch Punk sanctuary on fire. Even the filmmaking techniques of scaling the characters and the world is freaking brilliant, where it makes tiny figures like the ragdolls very proportional to human size, and even large contraptions like the fabrication machine look monstrous and enormous. But this movie, single-handedly, also acquires one of my favorite shots in cinematic history. Yes, this shot. As Nine is climbing up the rumble to see where the cat beast is taking to, we see a battlefield aftermath with decayed trees, war mechs in shambles, and a sky in a smoky, dawn-like haze. The framing, the color, and the lighting are so flawless that it should make every Disney and DreamWorks cinematographer jealous. Screw calling this good enough to be a painting, the Renaissance masters like Michelangelo can't make something as beautiful as this. Finally, before I summarize, there is one more thing that I cannot go without itemizing, and out of all the reviews I have seen, this one lone aspect is not mentioned throughout the reviews, and it deserves to be mentioned regardless, because it does not get the credit it rightfully deserves. Deborah Lurie and Danny Elfman's score is one of the best pieces of music I have ever heard for a movie, period. Every song, depending on a certain point in the film, whether it's emotional, haunting, joyful, exciting, and even intense, flows beautifully. Tracks like Burial encapsulate the grief loss of a close friend. Tracks like The Machines and The Seamstress inject levels of terror and dread. Out There capture hopefulness appropriately, and even in tracks like The Purpose and The Aftermath, provide intense and powerful stakes to the action sequences that the characters have with the film's villains. And even the final song, Release, as it gives the viewer a touching and emotional goodbye with a very bittersweet ending. This score deserves to be listened to and deserves to be recognized, because if you are reviewing this movie and you do not bring up the score, I would be disappointed in you. Nine is a diamond in the rough, and it's something that deserves a second and even third chance. Seriously, this is a decades-old movie, and to this day, I am still learning new information and new depths about this film years before I even saw it for the first time. Forget watching forgettable direct like Scoob and Trolls World Tour. This is an animated film that deserves every single amount of your investment and attention. I am astounded that Shane Acker, after creating a visionary world and a spellbinding and mystifying story, isn't making more feature-length films like this nowadays, because this movie deserves proper recognition. I have always been one for underrated gems and one for overlooked masterworks of any genre, animated and beyond. And ever since my first viewing, 9 has always been the creme de la creme of animated movies, and I have yet to see another animated movie to overthrow it. And without adding a single utterance of an Inglourious Basterds meme, I feel like I immortalized myself as a film critiquing legend. Watch 9 if you haven't seen it already, and if you are planning to see it again, do it right now. Alright everyone, so that was my review of one of my favorite movies of all time, 9. If you like this video, please like and comment below what you thought of the film yourself. You'll also find me on media outlets such as Facebook, Twitter, and if you have a phone, possibly find me on Instagram. And as always, if you'd like to see more reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. Seriously, Shane Acker, I hope you get back in the director's chair and make more animated movies, because more people need to hear your name. My name is Luke Newcomb. And you, my friends, have been blown away.